Today's episode is in English. El episodio de hoy de Gestoras es en inglés. Pueden leer una transcripción en español en nuestro sitio web o pueden ver el episodio en YouTube con subtítulos en español. Springs you conversations with cultural managers from the North and the South. We celebrate the work, sharing their stories of success, challenges, and lessons learned. The episodes alternate between Spanish and English. Petrona Xemi Tapepechul is a Nawat Trans Woman from Gusgatan, the land known internationally as El Salvador. She's a playwright, spoken word artist, a published author, and the founder and artistic director of Angel Rose Collective in Washington, D.C. This was our conversation. Yektanetsuk, Xemi. I hope I got it right. Welcome to Gestoras, and thank you for making the time to be with us today. It's really a pleasure to have you in the program.
Adiós, Yektanetsuk, Naunitugay Petrona Xemi, Wanusintugay Tapepechul, Niulpagi Ninemining Nusan. Hello, my name is Petrona Xemi Tapepechul, and I'm very happy to be here as well. I think that there's a combination of things. I think there's a biological aspect to it and a social aspect to it. I think like most things. For me, my story begins in El Salvador. I was born in San Salvador, and my family was living in an area called Mexicanos. From my own family research and from talking with family members, I've learned that my grandparents, they weren't from San Salvador. Most of my grandparents weren't from San Salvador. They come from other villages, and that they're themselves and their ancestors were carpenters and domestic servants and weavers and seamstresses. And so for me, in growing up, here in the United States, I grew up here in the United States, and learning about music and learning about theater and playing instruments, I started to connect the two things together. I realized that even though I do have like theater training and I have gone through that somewhat of that academic aspect of it, it's in my biology. My ancestors were artists in their own way. They were carpenters and weavers, and they created stuff with their hands. And I learned to do that through my own practice, and also through the studies that I've learned, in the white colonial education system. And so I think that who I am today and all these different aspects of my artistic identities are because of the experiences that my ancestors had, and also the experiences that I had to live through. I went to a school that, when I went, I grew up in Virginia.
That's quite a shift. In Salvador to Virginia.
Yes, it's a really big shift. And growing up in Virginia, there was not a lot of opportunities for like being successful or whatever, because there was always like some deterrent, like the language or like the race or just like the economic opportunities that exist for like the adults have, and so those affect the kids as well. And so growing from those experiences, I found that like once I graduated from high school, I wasn't able to go up to university like everybody, all the white kids that I graduated with were able to go off to school. I had to go to community college. I had to stay local, and I had to pay for it myself. Um, and so after I decided to go to acting school, I decided that I wanted to go to DC because it was nearby and it was the most affordable place that I could go. Um,
And DC is such a cool theater town too. There's so many theater folks around here.
that's true. That's true. And the school was a predominantly black school. The students were the student body was predominantly black, but the teacher, the staff was mostly white people, mostly white men. Um, and so that dynamic was really, uh, it was really, I'll just call it interesting, because the I was able to learn with other people who were going to experience similar things to me after we graduated, and we were all kind of put into that into like a box together, and we were all working there together like that. And so one thing that I really learned from my theater experience was to produce my own art, because other people were going to judge me just by who I am before they even get to see what I can do. And that was a really big thing that I learned in acting school. And so as soon as I finished acting school, I started working with people who had similar experiences where they were uh, a person of color, or they were queer, or whatever their experiences were coming in, they were having
Hmm.
difficulty in even community theater, getting into community theater. And so that's where my company began. We had a different name then, and the name has developed a lot throughout the years. But I've been producing consistently. I've been producing my own work for 10 years now.
And that is Angel. That's the Angel Rose Collective.
hmm The Angel Rose Artist Collective. Yes. It's been a really tough road developing the company's identity, because it is also like the company's it's also changed its dynamics. Um, and now like we focus on these stories of trans native people, um, and we also hire BIPOC individuals to be a part of our things, so that it is not just us getting getting work for ourselves or creating work for ourselves, but also creating work for all of our community members that are also struggling in this
Mm.
kind of uh, white supremacist and cis sexist industry that we are trying to work in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it looks like a lot of your work is based, a lot of your artistic identity and production is based on the word, right? So other people it's the image, right? Through, or it's the nose, and for you it's words, it's the poetry, the playwriting, the producing of plays. That language is really important to you.
Yes, I haven't really thought about it that way. I think for me, as a I became a playwright out of necessity, out of like a need to tell stories, because I want to say that at my core, I'm an actor.
Mm.
That's what I love to do. That's what I thrive in. I do love having a company and being able to like produce things and be able. But the reason that I do that is because I need to work. I need to get that acting out. Um, and if other people are not hiring me, then I have to create something myself. And if that creates opportunities for other people to also are experiencing similar things, I think it's just like it's a win-win for me. Um, but the running of the company and writing the plays and um, getting all the people together, that's the part that I don't like that part. I I like to get the script, and I like for somebody to tell me like you're doing it, like after I show them what I can do, they should be like, oh, you can move it this way, do that way. I like working with directors, and I yeah, it's a tough line for me because I know that people enjoy the stories that I write, and they have a big impact in some people's lives, and I think that like it's good, but at the same time, like I would I don't want it to be the Shemmy show, you know. And so I think it's important for there to be other people that are writing, and it's hard because there's not a lot of opportunities that are given for people to be able to develop that work and to be able to um, even have an opportunity to do something. I was really fortunate that in 2021 the Kennedy Center gave me a residency in one of their spaces for an entire week where I was able to just I'll be honest with you, I only wrote 2 scenes in one week, and it wasn't because like I was being lazy or because we weren't doing any work. It's because really important conversations were happening, not just in regards to like writing or like in regards to the scene work, but in regards to how do you work with specific artists, with specific identities, and how do you make it so that they
Yeah.
can even be in the space? How do you make it so that they can even give their full selves in a conversation, um, and accessibility being something that some questions about accessibility um, that we had that week were really important. It's something that I already knew, but it's also something that like institutions like the Kennedy Center and people who are providing funding for the work that the people in the community, the grassroots people are doing in the community, these institutions that are providing these so-called
Yeah.
access for people to be in the space. What does access actually mean if you invite a group of people that are doing a show with a deaf person of color, and then they invite interpreters that are white people, and it just changes the balance of the space. It changes the dynamic of how that deaf person of color can interact with the group, and how their voice is being interpreted into the space. And so it was a really big uh, yeah, it was really important work that was happening there that it had nothing to do with like us getting a show up and going. It had more to do with like getting our artists um, in the right place to even begin that work. Um, so yeah, all these conversations, I think that like when you are a person of color, when you're an indigenous person, when you're a black person, and you're working in predominantly white institutions, you an activist is kind of like what you have to be in order to be able to. But I think also like there's the intentionality of like being an activist that needs to that happens as well, which is not something that all BIPOC individuals do in workspaces, because some people just want to be able to survive and just be able to thrive, and without having to disturb the institution. And so everybody has their own experience and their own story. So, and I respect that. But for me, I have never been allowed into those institutions. I've never been allowed into
Mm.
those spaces to be able to be able to even be like to even have that opportunity to not speak up. Always had to say something, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to do the work that I want to do if we wouldn't have said anything as a community to the Kennedy Center that in that week that we were there, to be able to get Black interpreters into the room and interpreters of color into the room. Then we wouldn't have been able to produce the even those two scenes that we did. We wouldn't have been able to do those things because the people wouldn't be history that coming as their full selves. And so yeah, it's important. It's important to do that kind of stuff, and the intersection of art and activism for a lot of BIPOC producers, especially, is like
Yeah,
not.
you can't separate them because the environment just forces you into either you withdraw, right, and you pack up and you say, okay, I'm not even going to try, or you if you want to do anything, you have to become that activist. And I'm also interested in something you said about specifically around the issue of the Black interpreters for the show versus the white interpreters. It seems that sometimes in predominantly white institutions, the the way that they look at accessibility and the way that they look at inclusion is absolutely not intersectional, right? There's a hierarchy of access, right? So in the case of if we need a deaf interpreter, just thinking, oh, we need a deaf interpreter, without thinking about all the other intersections that would have mattered in that sense. And then it's almost as bad, or if not worse, than not having done anything at all.
Yeah, there's an impact on the person. My spouse wrote this poem a couple of years ago that had to do more with like ceremony, but it's like when let's say like colonizer people come and be like, oh, do the ceremony for me, do the ceremony for me. And as a native person, you go and you do it for them, and you might get paid to do it for them. But then afterwards, you are healing from that experience far long after that money's been spent, that money's gone, and far long after those people that received that blessing or that experience have moved far beyond that experience. And so the trauma that comes with being in those types of spaces, and even though there is like inclusion, or there's some financial some financial something that's given to you,
Sure.
there's still the impact afterwards that you have to like think about. And
Positions of leadership and advocacy and leadership and leadership in anything, they come at a price too, right? They come at a cost. So you are well, you said you were forced into activism in a way, right? And forced into managing a theater company because you had to create it in order to be able to act and have people who would not otherwise have the opportunity to be able to act. But it looks like to me like you also seek out opportunities or ways to lead. So you founded the school, right? You teach in Nawat, and I'm going to say this. I'm going to try to say this correctly. Siwayul as well. So it looks like leadership is something that you can't help doing, Xemi. Talk to me a little bit about the language school and about Siwayul. What's that about?
sure. So I started learning Nawat as a second language about 10 years ago, about the same time that I began the company. Um, and one of the things that living in the United States, now, just for a little bit of a context, Nawat is from Western El Salvador, and there's only about 100 first language speakers left in the world. And most of them live in one village in El Salvador, in a village called Santo Domingo de Guzman. And there's about like 55 or something like that. There's not very many speakers that are left alive today. And so about 10 years ago, there weren't a lot of people that were like, I mean, there was a lot of people that were interested in the language, but not a lot of people that were like investing themselves into learning and all that stuff. And because most people were scattered all over the world, they were in El Salvador or wherever, they were just connecting via Facebook or via other online means. In El Salvador, there was some development like to get people into physical classrooms, and well, obviously, being in the United States, you can't do that. And so, what do you have? You have music that people have put online on YouTube. So that's what I learned. That's where I started learning. Now, what there was elders that got their music recorded. They would put it online. People would subtitle them, and so then I started listening to the music, listening to that. And then I met an elder here in DC who was part of a group called the National Association of Indigenous Salvadorans, or ANIS for in Spanish, la Asociación Nacional Indígena Salvadoreña. And ANIS is based in El Salvador, but has a chapter here in the DC metropolitan area. And he gave me this book. It's about maybe like 30-page pamphlet book of it was called Timuestigang Nawat, which means let's learn Nawat. And I went through that book. I listened to the music. I went through the book, listened to the music, and I began to develop some skills in speaking Nahuatl. And so then I started writing down what I already knew, and I started to think myself like, okay, I'm a child and I want to learn Nahuatl. What way can I learn Nahuatl? And so then I started writing my first kids play in Nahuatl or with Nahuatl. Um, started writing music in Nahuatl. And then eventually, um, I so I had some friends that were encouraging me to write poetry, to write how like the things that I go through, because I had one poem here, one poem there, and eventually I wrote a whole book of poetry, and I decided to publish it. Was actually I had left. I was living in New Jersey at the time, and I left because I it was a really bad experience. So I left, and when I came back to the DMV area, to the DC metropolitan area, I had to. It was actually a time when I was going through a social transition. So before I identified as a non-binary person, and during that time period when I came back from New York, I had, a couple of, probably like a year prior to that, I began a social transition as a trans woman. And when I went to New Jersey, and I had to come back, I didn't have a place to live, so I had to go live with my parents. And um, I grew up in a Pentecostal Christian home, and so you can imagine what my parents would say to having a trans child. And so whenever I would go home, I had to change how I dressed. And it was a time period where I had to, trans men wear binders. I wore binders a lot during that time period because my parents began asking me about like my chest, and they began asking me about like my skin. They began asking me about my hair. They began asking me about all these questions about like how my body was changing because of like, because what was
Right.
happening was the hormones were changing my body. And so they had a lot of questions. So I had to basically like simular. I'm not sure what the question, what the word is in what the word is in English. But
In essence, act. You were
mhm, yeah, yeah. I'm basically hiding. Yeah, I was acting. Yeah. And so whenever I could, I would go to DC and just
be you.
be,
Yeah.
be happy there. And eventually, I met the person who eventually became my spouse now, who
Mhm.
we have a child together now. But I met them, and we moved to West Virginia together
Mm.
because they were living there on this really big plot of land with other trans people. And while I was there, I wrote my second book of poetry, and I decided to publish both of them. I think while I was living in West Virginia, one of them was nominated for a Lambda Literary Award. The second one was nominated for Lambda Literary and Bisexual Poetry. And I began to feel like, oh, maybe I'm a writer. If people are seeing me as a writer, maybe I am a writer. And so I decided that I wanted to combine poetry and Nahuatl together. And so that's where Siwayul came from. Siwayul is it's a one woman show centering poetry and the Nahuatl language. It features this young girl who is kicked out of her house, and she's just traveling the world on her own, guided by her ancestors. And and she's studying the Nahuatl language, and her ancestors talk to her as she's doing that. The character of La Siwanawa comes out, and she's part of the one of the ancestors um, that guides her through her process. And I was able to develop that show through several years. I had a reading of it 1 year, and then eventually we had a full staging of it in 2019 at the Capitol Hill Arts Workshop in Southwest DC. Um, and it was a really great experience to be able to share what some people called an autobiographical story. To me, it wasn't. To me, it was sharing parts of myself, parts of my life, but through this narrative of this child um, who um, who was a trans girl. And personally, I don't I don't think that I had a girlhood. I don't think that I had like a childhood where I was a girl, and so that's where kind of like my identity shifts differently from the identity of this character. Um, and so I don't see it as an autobiographical story, but it is. I think it is a story that a lot of people will be impacted by because it shares really
Right.
impactful things that are happening to the trans community today, and also it intersects with the with what a lot of Salvadoran people are going through, um, because a lot of the communities in El Salvador went through a series of Latinidad in the last 200 years since independence. Um, a lot of people are only a couple generations cut from
Mm.
Nawat language or from their other languages, or even from identity of being indigenous. It's only a couple of generations that people have began to
Mm-hmm.
identify as Ladina or Ladino, instead of indigenous, and so um, a lot of people in the Salvadoran community, a lot of Ladino people are trying to reconnect with their ancestral identities. Um, and so, personally, for me, I've always been indigenous. My mom
Mm-hmm.
has always dressed this way, and so I've never had to think about being indigenous or not. Um, but I do know that like that's not the experience that every Salvadoran has, and that it's actually a very minute experience, a very minority experience, and that most people are going through a process. I'll even say like even I'm going through a process of reconnection because I've
Right.
only been learning Nahuatl for 10 years now, and even though I'm fluent in Nahuatl, um, it's something that my mom doesn't know, and my grandmas didn't know, and so um, it's been a couple of generations that it's also been lost in my family. So it is I think for a lot of people, even people that are connected, it is a series of reconnection. And so the play was also talking on that topic of how does a trans woman who's a
Mm-hmm.
trans girl that's been kicked out of her home have a reconnection with with
Right.
family that
Yeah.
doesn't even want her.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's just a reminder that like that ancestors and family are, even though ancestors are family from the past, ancestors and family have different
Yeah.
contexts of who
Yeah.
you are as an individual. And so if your family members are not accepting of you, that doesn't mean that your ancestors weren't, or that they wouldn't. It just means that the people that are around you today are not caught up with you.
It sounds like you were talking about some of your ancestors being textile workers, weavers, right? And it sounds like what you're doing is making new cloth out
Hmm.
of the strands, right? There's a rip in this piece
Mm.
of textile, where the language was lost, where these customs were lost, where uh, people in your ancestry who would have definitely resonated with you and connected with you, that was lost, and you're taking that and weaving it back together. You've talked a lot about how your identities, your different identities, influence your work, your artistic practice. I'm interested to see how they show up in what you hate, in the producing and the managing, or the part that you like less. How do your identities show up in the way, for example, that you work with actors, that you run your company, that you organize? How do they come in?
um, I, in regards to the way that I work as a producer with people that are outside the community, um, it oftentimes it's on this level of like, oh well, we need this
Yeah.
diverse individual, or we need like this group of people that
Tokenization. Yeah.
tokenization essentially, or there's a sense of like, well, we can't have these people because they're going to change our dynamic, or they're going to make questions on our politic, or they're going to be near our children, or whatever discriminatory thing they might be thinking. We get those two things, and we've we've had a really big difficulty with finding spaces and being able to produce work because of these types of discriminations that people, or these biases that people have about our community. um, and, and personally, we all have biases. I have my own biases about even
Mm-hmm.
like Latino people, because like I
Mm-hmm.
personally don't identify as Latina. Because that, for me, it's an identity that it's for lack of a better term, it's a U.S. identity or an American identity. It has nothing to do with me being born in El Salvador, me
Mm-hmm.
being from an
Yeah.
indigenous family. It has nothing to do um, with who I am. It's just an imposition of of
Right.
my being. And it also like, it has such a
Yeah.
tie to the term Ladina, Latino, Latina, Latina, Ladino. It's like the
Mm-hmm.
same word, just one letter different. And to me, when people try to like force that
Mm-hmm.
identity onto me, I don't like it, because I don't think that
Right.
I don't think it's for everybody. Um, I think many times when we're doing production, when we're producing work, people always ask us if we want to work with them to leave some identities off the table,
Hmm.
to when we meet them to not be this or to not be that. And maybe they don't always ask it directly, but it's, you know, kind of like talking
Mm-hmm.
about like the axes that we were just talking about. If the space is created so that these identities can't come into the space, then yeah, it's like, it's almost as though the person is saying, "Don't bring that
Mm-hmm.
identity into the space." Um, and I find that like many times when we are trying to do work in spaces that is not that's not run by a community member or somebody that we know, it it's it it becomes very much like us teaching them how
Right.
to treat us, or
Mm-hmm.
how to host us, which is not something that is like, we don't, it's not something that we consent to, essentially. Like, it's not something that
It's
like,
not what you signed up for.
right, exactly, exactly. And so uh we try I try to work with as many people as possible. But it's also like
Mm-hmm.
people don't want to work with us because of, because I think the one thing that I received one time that somebody said, I won't say who they are or anything. I'll just say that this is a cis person of color. Um, they said to me, "We don't want to invite your group to participate because I don't think that the pay is high enough. You deserve more pay." And that might sound great to some people, but when you take away a person's agency on deciding whether or not it's enough pay, then you are taking away opportunities. Um, and people do this all the time in different ways, where they think that they're helping by not including, because we're helping you dodge a bullet, or we're helping you not experience discrimination. Um, but what it is like keeping people from opportunities.
The end result is the same, right? The end result is that you don't have the opportunity, and the end result is that you're not included. Yeah.
Exactly. And like, people work for visibility all the time, and people have no problem asking,
Mm.
so and so and so and so, for for for
Mhm.
just for visibility work. Um, and and I mean, I respect the fact that people are not just going to be asking trans people to work for free, and that people want trans people to be able to be paid. But at the same time, like, agency is important too.
That the decision sit with you and not with a savior who may have your best interest at heart,
Hmm.
but is not informed enough to know what the choices are, or it's not their job, right, to make the decision
Exactly.
for you.
It's not their job. Hmm.
How did you learn to? How did your leadership come to you? How did you learn how to lead, or was it something that you always had inside you?
I think that, like, working with other people, with other, I'll just speak from experience of, like, the company. When working with other artists, I often feel as though, like, I'm the one that has a lot of
Mm,
experience because I went to acting school. Um, and I went to a school that taught you about producing your own work. And so I already feel empowered to do these things, even though, like, I'm a little, like, reserved sometimes, and I'm an extrovert. I already feel empowered by my past experiences, but not everybody has those experiences. And so when they're coming into a space where this is different than other professional theater companies, because other professional theater companies, they seek out everybody, and they bring people from all different identities and cultures in to
mm,
do work together, and they pick, as you know, as sometimes what they say, like, the best of the best. um, but when your company is centered around trans, indigenous, BIPOC experiences, then the people that come are the people that have those identities. And that doesn't always mean that they come with all of the experience that other people come. It doesn't mean that they come with all of the, even the money or the home or all the different things that other people might have. And so working with people, and myself, I've experienced homelessness
mm,
a lot in these past 10 years of my art. Um, Other people have also been
right.
experiencing that. And so being able to learn how to be
Mm,
compassionate with people, and um, being compassionate with yourself
mm,
too, I think it's for me, it's been a big process of, and I think I'm still learning on how to
mm,
be, a leader. um, of It's a process of gaining little nuggets of information
mm,
from one person and another person, that have gotten me to the point where I feel comfortable working with different types of people, um, and not speaking for people from identities that I don't hold, but advocating for them from my own identities so that they can be in the space as well. Um, and it's been a big challenge. Even, like, in the last 3 months, I've learned a lot of new things about how to react, because I go to therapy. I mean, I have a healthy mental health I have a healthy relationship with my own mental health. I go to therapy. I I know that, like, my communication is in need of a lot of work, and that I oftentimes, because I come from these experiences, that I lead with defense, and so that comes into play in interpersonal relationships, and in as a
yeah.
arts, manager. And I have to learn to be compassionate, and be compassionate with other myself and with other people. And so, yeah, even in the last 3 months, I've learned that, like, sometimes it's not a how do I say that? It's not, like, no matter how much money you've invested as a company, or as an organizer, no matter how much time or whatever, if the people are not good, if they're not physically good, mentally good, spiritually good, then the art is not going to be good. And so there's nothing wrong with putting a pause on your schedule. And maybe for some big companies it is
Mhm.
like, oh, it's thousands of dollars of lost revenue, but at the end of the day, like, the relationships with the people is more important than the money that might come from the art that's been produced with those people. And so it's a big thing.
The quality of the art also, but the sustainability of the work, right? If people feel taken care of, they feel like they belong, but not that they belong in the sense that they're imprisoned in the job, but that they belong in the sense that they own it in some way, and that they receive something back from it that isn't just a salary or pay, but that there's care there on both sides. It makes things a lot more sustainable and gets you through some rougher patches as well. Yeah. So you're talking about your own learning progress as a human being, not just as a leader. And I'm sure that because of the position you've taken, that there are people who come to you for advice or that you mentor. If you were to encounter your younger self today, or one of these younger people or newer people comes to you, maybe not younger, but newer people to the space comes to you, what advice do you give them? What is something that you would want either your younger self to know or you want them to know?
Mm, I it I think personally for me it's a little bit hard to think of myself as like an older person. Um, Sometimes it's not about age or even experience. A lot of times it's not always about, it's sometimes about access too. Like, even though I am 33 years old, I have a child, I'm married, it looks like I have my life together, but that doesn't mean that I have the same type of resources that somebody who has a bachelor's degree, who just graduated from university, and who's had a job in government or has had a job in a nonprofit. Um, you know, I might be older than them. I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, I think that, like, I don't want to. I don't want to sound patronizing to people, like, just because they're 10 years younger than me. I think that I feel good with giving advice to, like, youth, but not to adults. I think that adults have their own agency. They have their own. Um, they have their own responsibility. They have their own. They should be held accountable for their own actions. Um, and I think that, like, something that people say all the time,
Savior
like,
may
don't
have your
meet your
best interest at
heroes
heart,
or
but
whatever.
what the choices are,
Um, you
or
know, like, I get that, like, but we all got to remember, like, people are human beings. Everybody's going through something. Everybody's moving through the world. Everybody's learning also. And so to have this, to put this identity of hero onto somebody else, um, I think it's non-realistic, and it's to put expectations that somebody didn't consent to. Um, I personally, I don't want. I get that people see me as a role model or whatever, but I don't accept that identity, because I I'm doing it from the work that I do is for my baby, for my child. And so I want to be a role model for my child, and I don't want to, and
yeah,
I know that they can hold me accountable to that. They can hold me accountable to being a good role model, but other people cannot, because they're not invested in my day to day life, and they're not, um,
yeah,
yeah. So I think mentorships are good. I think a part of my bitterness, I think part of my feeling around this is because I didn't have mentors. Um, I have people that I do look up to now in the last couple of years that I've started looking up to. Um, but that's because I see that they're doing work that
mm,
I admire, and that I want to work with. But growing up, I didn't have people that. I didn't have in my mind like, okay, this is an actor that I want to be like,
Right.
or this is a director that I want to be like, or this is whatever artist that I want to be like.
You couldn't see them, right? They
I mean,
weren't there. You can't. Well, I think despite yourself, you have given advice. Basically, I think what I get out from this is don't be patronizing, be accountable, get yourself together.
in a non-patronizing way.
So yeah, you've given there 3 pieces of advice. How do you feel about that?
But I think that for youth, I think that for youth, what I would say to them is that um, it's a tough world that we're living in, and even if the person that you connect with is yourself, find somebody to connect with, because yeah, it's a long road ahead of you. Life is something that's going to keep on moving, and if you don't have supportive parents, for instance, find somewhere that you do feel safe. Find somewhere that, even if it's writing in your journal or singing songs to creating songs to yourself, whatever, or learning a language, whatever it is that makes you feel connected to yourself, to your ancestors. Um, do the best you can to keep pushing forward, regardless of what other people might tell you to do or
Yeah,
to feel or to be. Um,
that's a
yeah.
beautiful thought, right? To find a safe place, whatever that may be, in whatever size. It doesn't have to be grandiose, although it could be. It could be just a small thing. Whatever it is, it helps you make that connection. It's very beautiful. So, that we ask every one of our guests to leave a question for someone else, and we ask everyone to respond to a question someone else has left. So, you ready for this? Okay. So, the question I'm going to ask you was left by Victoria Sanchez, who is an orchestra conductor from Venezuela living in Mexico. And her question was, in 3 words, who are you?
In 3 words, uh, I want to say that I am a student. I think I'm a lifelong student. I'm a caretaker, and I I create. I'm a creator, and so yeah, I think I'm a creator. I'm a caretaker, and I'm a student. Yeah, when I think all three of those things are really important for me to be able to continue. It's a big thing. Growing, caring for people, learning from people, and creating. I think I'll be doing that for the rest of my life.
What question would you like to leave for someone else?
Ah, this is a tough one. I've been thinking about this. Um, I guess my question is, how are you showing up for people who are not in the room? And if you already are actively doing that in your day to day work, um, what are some ways that you can continue learning from the way that you show up from people that are not in the room?
That's a really good one. That's a really good one. Thank you for that. Petrona Xemi
DJ,
Tapepechul, thank you very much
very
for
good.
all of this. It's just been such a pleasure to hear from you and to hear about how you think and how you
Mm.
approach your work. It's really been a really fantastic conversation. Thank you.
A lot of times it's about, it's not always about, it's sometimes about access too. Like,
I'm so glad.
even 3 years old, married, it
This
looks
was
like I have that
Historias.
doesn't mean that I
This
sources
episode of
that somebody
Historias
who
was
has a
hosted by
bachelor's
me,
degree
Jimena Varela,
who's
and produced by
had a
Anushka Tanyan.
job in a nonprofit,
It was recorded in Washington,
older
D.C.
than
Our
them.
theme
I
song
think that
is
like
Hace que
I don't
exista,
want to. I don't
Make
sound
it exist
patronizing
by
because they're
Eli
10 years younger
Kalmik.
than me. That
The
I
graphic
think that
design is
giving
by
advice
Bia
to like
Silva.
youth. I think that adult
Historias is mixed
agency
and supported in part by the Arts Management
their
Program
own
at American
they
University,
should be held.
Washington, D.C.
Um,
For
I think
50
that like
years,
something that
the
people
Arts
say all
Management
the time,
Program
like
at American University
may have your best
has
interest
been
at heart.
training leaders in the arts to change the world for the better.
I
Find out
remember
more
like
at
people are here through something, everybody's moving learning
artsmanagement.american.edu.
also. To put
Follow us on
this
YouTube at
identity of
Gestoras
heroes,
and on Facebook and
it's
Instagram at Gestoras
non-realizations that somebody
Podcast.
didn't I
Thank you for
personally,
listening,
I don't
and
want,
don't forget
I
to
get
like
role
and
model or
subscribe.
whatever. No, I don't accept that identity because I